Over the past couple of weeks, there have been 2 developer workshops released about why DE makes the UI for the new UI like they do. Now, the first post was made by Pablo a couple weeks back, and the second was by Rebecca just a few days before this video goes live. Starting with Pablo's post, which is part 1, Warframe has almost 200 screens, and over the course of the past year and a half, DE has updated 131 of them, which leaves, of course, 70 screens remaining. Now, the post states that the 2 most common types of feedback regarding UI are 1, the need for information, and 2, that it is overwhelming. Pablo explained the dilemma that this causes by saying, these 2 are generally the forces that pull us in opposite directions. On rare occasions, you can find some solutions that make a screen less overwhelming without having to lower the amount of information displayed at once. But for the most part, these are 2 conflicting objectives. The compromise we arrived at to try and circle this square was to use a variant of progressive disclosure, which in practice means we add more information, but put it behind rollovers or clicks. With that said, the post moves to discuss the ability screen, and it explains why it was changed to how we see it in-game right now. A common approach in user experience is to treat it as a conversation. In this case, that being the previous version of the ability screen, the player clicked on abilities, so they're asking, what are Chroma's abilities? And our answer was to show you a small picture of each one, giving you all the stats, full description, how they were affected by mods, and more. In a conversation, our answer should have been closer to, these are the abilities. Do you want to know more about any of them? Then the player can say which one they want to know about. The old screen is closer to a spreadsheet, which can be a very useful and powerful tool for someone that is familiar with the data, but overwhelming for someone trying to get familiar with it. The new version essentially follows the conversation structure by showing you 6 options for you to decide which one you want to hear about, passive, abilities, or tips, while at the same time putting the fiction of the Warframe front and center by using the diorama. By making the display of the abilities be one at a time, it empowered us to add videos to each one, which explained the ability much better than the old images ever could. Before this change, descriptions had to be extremely short because of the limited space for text. But now if you look at Gauss, for example, his descriptions are quite a bit more detailed than we could have afforded in the past. Similar with space for stats, it was one of the main hurdles to adding augment stats. The new version also allows the space to show old and new stats side by side. Before you had to toggle the button to see the change, now it's just there. And the addition of tips served as a place to expose players to certain synergies, ability quirks that before were only on the wiki. Now the post moves to the topic of the tooltip. Earlier, I talked about treating user experience as a conversation. Expanding on that, it is not always the same conversation. What are Chroma's abilities is what someone newer to Chroma would ask, but what a Dragon Master was asking when clicking on the ability screen really was closer to, what are the effects of my mod choices on Chroma? Undeniably, the screen's answer to this question is more cumbersome, since you can't at a glance see them all anymore. So what we did to address this was to change where that conversation takes place, by adding it directly to the upgrade screen, removing the need for you to go back and forth between the screens. A big win from moving to a tooltip approach is that the functionality done for this is much more portable than it used to be. If we wanted to have ability stats in the upgrade screen before, we needed to do an entirely separate design and code solution for it, and given the limited space in that screen, it never came to be. But now that it's on the tooltip, we were able to fit it not only there, but in the market, the arsenal, and even the screen where you choose your first frame during the intro tutorial. As for how this information applies to the future, he continues. Extrapolating from this past decision to future ones, you can imagine how this approach will affect things like the arsenal. Right now, when picking weapons, you can see their icon, name, rank, lens, and form account or mastery. We haven't designed this yet, so I don't know for sure that this would be the change. But I imagine we would no longer show the lens or the former on the grid, and instead have those on the tooltip, and then the tooltip would have additional information that isn't there today, like if it has a catalyst, an Exilus adapter, mastery requirement, weapon description, and stats. The last 2 you can currently see on click, so again, hiding some information behind player actions, but adding more information is our general approach. But even this simple example raises other questions. For example, hiding former behind hover is likely not a big deal since it's used more for completionist purposes, so not very time sensitive, but hiding the lens is a bigger deal, since you sometimes want to choose a weapon to get some Naramon focus, and hovering over them to find one can be annoying. You can use the search bar, but still. Lenses also have the advantage of only showing where there is one installed, so it doesn't contribute to clutter. So there's arguments to be made to keep it, even if it goes counter to all the other stuff I said, which is my not very subtle way of saying there's no one solution to every problem we encounter, and we gotta try and keep analysing them case by case, and when we miss the mark, we know we got you to remind us. So that's the big one, the main thing that guides a lot of what we are doing. But I also want to talk about some other smaller but important things. Consistency. With as many systems and as many screens as we have had over the years, we didn't always come up with the same solution to similar challenges, and that means inconsistency. For example, a very basic thing. How do you display an element and its information in a grid? He shows us 6 different screens over the course of the past couple of years, but what it comes down to is the click takes you to the screen with new info. The info is on the right side, the info is on the top, the info is on the top and right, the info is inside the element, and the stacking horizontal grids. Each of those images are relevant to what I just said. Back to Pablo's post. Now we have been changing most screens to grid on left, details on the right. You can see a lot of the examples above we have already reworked. We've been trying, not always succeeding, to remove this, and other inconsistencies as we rework the screens. Why is item labels a setting, and why is it off by default? Not gonna lie, sometimes I ask myself this very question too. Our logic was that 90% of our items have very recognizable icons. We looked at some of our contemporaries at the time and none of them had item labels, and most of them had smaller, less unique icons than we did. So we felt comfortable removing item labels. Of course, I said 90%. The other 10% is not so great. Clear cases are relic icons and weapon component icons. For the latter, we do have a desired solution that adds the resulting item icon to a corner, but this task keeps getting pushed further and further down the queue. It is in the wishlist though, and for the relics, we force the labels on as always. Is this a good solution? Does it help in any way to keep the screen somewhat cleaner without them? The honest answer is we can't know for sure. Personally, I play without labels on, and I don't miss them. But when we do find a case where they are solely missed, like recently in the avionics scrapping screen, we force the labels on. So why does the new Railjack UI use hold to confirm? This is another new thing we are trying with the Railjack UI. Confirmation pop-ups are tried and true, but they do have some disadvantages. For example, this one for polarizing Revenant. It tells me what will happen, but also it hides the context of what I did. I can't see the slot I polarized or the polarity I chose. I have found myself cancelling out of this screen out of fear that I selected the wrong polarity. Hold to confirm would preserve the context, so as you hold, you will be able to see the slot and the polarity you selected. Another downside of confirmation pop-ups is that since there are so many of them, most people stop reading them. If you only saw them on rare occasions, you'd be more likely to pay attention to what they say. I've gotten a request twice now to implement a special dialogue for when you polarize a slot into the same polarity it already had. That actually has been in the game for years, but since it's a pop-up amongst a sea of pop-ups, people don't notice it. Does this mean we need to start spreading hold to confirm all over the place? I don't rightly know, to be honest. In big part, it will depend on your responses to this post. Mostly why I wanted to write this wall of text to begin with. I want you to understand why we do what we do, but at the end of the day, we make it for you, so hopefully knowing our reasoning, you can help guide us down the right road. Last but not least, I want to share some of the screens we are currently working on. These are complicated ones, so don't expect them super soon, but they are in the works. The World State panel will host resource drones, show more specific missions, and be affected by UI themes, as well as getting the following fixed. Mods showing up as stretched images, or how rolling over invasions or sorties can make the scroll bar go nuts. The Mastery Test pre- and post screens will also feature the new Mastery rank badges and an option to practice run the test from the screen. And then we'll get an updated end of mission screen with this work in progress image that Pablo says the following. We are changing the end of mission screen quite a bit, by consolidating the mod and item sections into a single grid and increasing how many items you see at first glance from 6 to 10. Syndicates and item affinity are also going to be put together into the progress bar that will show focus, intrinsics, and more. Stats are being moved into their own section with a few added ones like healing done, crowd control time, and damage prevented. And we are introducing special recognition for things done during the mission. For example, you might have found a lot of the Syndicate medallions, revived your teammates, or put out a lot of fires in Railjack. We want to recognize that you aided your team there, and that who did the most damage isn't the only thing that matters. Finally, we are adding more flavor to it by showcasing your whole squad. As we mentioned earlier, a common approach in user experience is to treat it as a conversation. In the case of this developer workshop, a player might be asking, how is DE approaching their UI designs? And now you have the answer. A lot of Warframe's DNA has mutated over the years by reacting to not only what players say about the game, but how the game is actually being used. We will use both these pillars as we continue on our 200 screen journey. Now, Pablo later released a reply answering some questions and responding to player feedback and thoughts, and that follows before we get to Rebecca's post. Item labels. A few of you made very good points, that even if most items have unique icons, the ones that don't, relics and prime parts, are very important items, especially for trading. Also, lots of good points about how much harder icons are to learn when you can't put a name to the face. In regards to the end of mission screen, there will be item counts just like in any other grid. The mock is essentially just saying space for 10 things. Also, a title and whatnot, the mock is still work in progress, and generally they also change as we implement. In both sections we would have sorting, so if you got intrinsics, that would be sorted to the top of progression. If you were doing a Samaris daily, his rep would sort up, but if you just scanned a few enemies, it would be lower down. So hopefully with this, 6 slots is enough to show you the important stuff you got that mission. Setting up for 2 UIs. This isn't really something viable. As I mentioned, we have around 200 screens and the amount of work it would take to maintain an old and new UI is just not possible for our team. And that ends Pablo's post. As mentioned earlier in the video, Rebecca later released part 2 of this developer workshop on the 8th of February, where she announced that in a future update, item labels would be on by default. The post also includes the following information and changes. It reads, under hold to confirm experiment. We are removing this experimental interaction in most cases. It's only staying in real-time combat scenarios to prevent accidental clicking. The removal of hold to confirm will be implemented first in the intrinsic and avionic screens, where places you would normally hold to confirm will now simply require a click plus a dialog screen like usual. And then the addition of hold to confirm is going to be placed in the abort mission screen to prevent accidental mission aborting, as well as remain in the real-time Railjack payload and refine management screen. Under controller-friendly UI pass and improvements. There are several areas we are going to review for better controller usability, including refining the base cursor velocity while using a controller, expanding the options available to customize cursor speed, making it easier to manually interact with scroll bars using the cursor, increasing the detection area to interact with the scroll bar, and increasing the effect when hovering over the scroll bar to make it more pronounced and obvious that you are using it. These should improve a lot of interactions for any controller users on PC and console. Item details, detailed purchase dialog. This screen actually starts with a story. The day we had our developer workshop review meeting, we also released the Kuva Nukor, Kuva Hind, and Kuva Brahma. Players immediately began chat linking these items to view their details. All stats are hidden behind a hover on about, and thus we had a perfect day to make a decision on the changes for this screen since we could watch in real time how players interacted with the new content. As a result, we will be retooling this screen to be less hover dependent and provide stat information at a glance as seen via the on-screen screenshot mockup. As for the end of mission screen. As we work on the redesign of this screen, we will ensure there is an expanded version of the screen you can access. Once you choose this expanded version, the game will remember it and only present you with this version of the screen for future missions, until you choose to collapse it again. We are still working on mockups for this, which will come in a future workshop or dev stream. Mastery icons are still being iterated on, and there will be more to be shown soon. And the last bit of information and news from this developer workshop is that eventually we will have a Forge All option in the dry dock, refinement, and forging screen. Anyway, that concludes the developer workshop for both part 1 and part 2 regarding why DE makes the UI like they do. Thank you for watching.